Right. Welcome, everyone. This is our uh, program tonight with Alex, talking about the art of observation. She's an artist and she's using art to teach us how to observe birds and improve our bird identification. So, Alex, um, welcome.
Hello. All right. Here's the agenda for tonight. First will be the introduction about me, and then a little bit of art foundations for you guys, and then some bird anatomy, and then my three-step process that I've made, which will make drawing birds a more digestible process for you guys. And then after that, we'll wrap it up with some demonstration drawings, and hopefully, if you guys have like a paper and pencil handy, that would be good. So you can draw along with me if you want. So this is me. I've been an artist all my life. I went to art school for like 1.5 years, and then I decided that I actually didn't want to do it for a living, so I switched my degree, and now I'm birding. I've only been birding since December of 2022, um, so a little under a year. It'll almost be a year. And I've also only been with Marion Audubon for a little under a year, and I've already done so much. It's I really love what I do. It's very exciting. Our goal today is to turn your bird brain into an artist brain. It's easier than you think. People often ask me if my passion for drawing came first or my interest in watching birds. I've always done both. For me, the two are intertwined and mutually supportive in ways that I can't even begin to describe. Whenever I watch birds, I am thinking about all of the details of drawing them. And that's a quote by David Allen Sibley in a book by John Muir Laws called The Law's Guide to Drawing Birds. I love this book so much. Um, they sell it at the Barnes and Noble here in town. There's still a few more copies, so I very much recommend going and picking that up. But we already know you have the eye of a birder. Now it's time to put those observation skills to use. You're already at an advantage. Don't worry if your art looks bad. People always tell me, oh, I can only draw a stick figure. I can only do this. I can only do that. You're at an advantage because you've been birding, like, I mean, some of you have been birding for your whole lives. So don't stress about it. Your art skills will develop much quicker than people who haven't, you know, been birding or looking at nature or observing for as long as you guys have. It's not going to be that bad. So yeah, the greatest reward of drawing is not the product or the actual drawing, but it's the process itself. Every time you look at something and draw it, your muscles in your brain are connecting to one another. This is why repetition is key, because you gain that muscle memory. If your goal is to make pretty images, you will get disappointed quickly. This is something that comes with practice and time. Focus on the observation. Again, you want to keep the only perfect practice makes perfect drawings. So every time you observe something, you want to pay attention to the details and kind of slow down and take it all in. Don't rush. Do not beat yourself up. Every time you want to have a negative thought about your art, turn it into constructive criticism instead. You are your own worst enemy. And being an artist, that's a very powerful thing. You don't want to give yourself too much power because you can really get defeated and burnt out very quickly. Some things you want to keep in mind when you're drawing, you want to hold your pencil as light as you can, while at the same time making confident strokes. And the easiest way to build that up is by doing some circle drills. So you just want to make a bunch of circles over and over again before you draw. It'll kind of warm up your hand and again build up some of that muscle memory. Um, So one bird was made using purposeful lines with variation in thickness. This variation in thickness is used to emphasize parts of the bird and draw the viewer's eye to those parts of the bird. Um, so the one on the bottom was done with those in mind. And then the one on the top is something that beginners will end up making, which obviously you could tell is a bird. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just that over time, your line quality will get much, much better. And you'll start to emphasize parts of the bird's body, like his wing or maybe his back, and that will create a lot more visual interest in your drawings. But I do not worry about that so much. Just do lots of your shape drills to gain confidence and build up your muscle memory. Bird anatomy basics. You guys already know about birds, obviously, so I'm not going to go too crazy into the anatomy, but it is important to keep in mind when you're drawing them because they have to be proportionately correct, or else they're going to look like, I don't know, like dogs or something weird like that. In these two pictures, I've used a three-step process to represent all of the important parts of bird anatomy that we should be mindful of when drawing them. This process focuses on the foundational building blocks of the bird, his main joints and backbone, and then the outline of the bird. So the first step in drawing the bird, what I do, oops, where did it go? There it goes. I start with these, they're kind of hard to see, but there's these purple circles that just make up the shape of the body and the head. And then after that, you can think about where's his backbone and where are his legs. And then after you draw his backbone, his legs, and his neck, then in green, you can draw his wings. And then after that, finally, you can add all the lines and details of the bird. The wings, we'll get into these in much more detail a little bit later. I'll open up my drawing program so that you guys can see all of the groups of feathers because it gets a little confusing. But yeah, here's when you see wing bars on a bird, this is kind of how they will look when the wing is stretched out. Here's the two main feather groups. Here are the primaries in green and the coverts in pink. Okay, now we can start drawing. So these are just 3 books. If you guys want to screenshot this, these are 3 books that I recommend that you get if you're a beginner artist. These are really, really good foundational books. Okay. And I can go back to the screen if you guys want later on. And if you have any questions, I'm not able to look at the chat too easily because I would have to switch screens a lot. So if you have questions, you can just unmute yourself and just ask them straight away. This way we can kind of have a conversation during the drawing process. Okay. So here is our bird anatomy of his wing. So here are all the groups. There's a lot of them, but I've kind of simplified them. So we have our coverts on the top. They kind of cover the top of the wing. That's how you can remember coverts, cover. And then the primaries all along the bottom. Those are those super long feathers. You have your primary coverts, your lesser coverts, greater coverts, and medium coverts. And then here are the secondaries down here. Those are those long ones. The alula is a part of the bird wing that not many people pay attention to, but in some birds, it can be really, really kind of dramatized. Let me see. Yeah, like in this owl, you can kind of see that alula feather sticking out. Sometimes it's kind of fun to draw those on certain birds just to give your picture more visual interest. But yeah, if you want to study all the groups specifically, you can open up a textbook and look on Google Images and stuff. There's a lot of them, but they're not all super important. The most important ones would probably just be these main ones, which is just the primaries and the coverts. And of course, your scapular feathers, which connect the body to the wing. These are all over here. So just remember your coverts and the primaries. So when you're drawing the wing, here's how I like to connect it to the body. It starts from his spine, which I'm going to do in blue so you could see. So there's probably where his spine would be. And then on each side, the shape of the wing, the joints will all be kind of different lengths on these birds. The sandhill crane, this first joint will be pretty short. So it goes down up, and then down again. And that feather is obviously going outwards, but I say down because if he wants to fold his wing inwards, it'll go this way. It'll go down, up, and then down again if he wants to fold that wing in. So yeah, there's only three curves or three lines that you have to really worry about. So let's go into this three-step process a little more. First, in purple will be your building blocks. These will be just the shape of the head and the body of the bird. So let me draw one down here. Just kind of roughly, sort of like maybe a warbler shape down here. And then your skeleton joints. So let me zoom in a little more on this bird. These I'll do in blue. So the bird has a lot of feathers on him, and those feathers help to keep him warm. So bird skeletons are very, very weird looking. If you pull them up on Google Images, most of the mass of the bird will be from his feathers. So like there would be his skull. Here's his little neck bone. Bird, their rib cage is structured pretty weird. It's kind of gross, but if you ever have carved a turkey, you kind of know what that central I don't even know what bone that is. Just the front of the rib cage. How it's that real thick flat piece in the middle of their body. And then we would have his backbone right there. And then his eensy weensy little tailbone. Okay, so there's the main mass of his body. Now for his joints, so for his leg bones and for his wings. Remember I said in the wings they go down, up, down. So down, up, and then down. And these are the bones, so they're pretty short compared to the actual uh overall mass of the feather. Like the feather would be way longer than the bones. Right there. And to simplify these main feather groups, the shape of them, you're always going to separate it at these little joints. So here is one group. And then here are the secondaries. And then you could draw like every single feather if you really wanted to and spend a lot of time on that. But really, all you have to do is just put these coverts in like that. And then just add in your primary flight feathers. The shape of the flight feathers can vary a lot in birds, especially if you're looking at like waterfowl versus warblers versus raptors. Um, so let me do kind of a zoomed in version of these first feathers that will be right here. So here's your joint. Here's the alula. So for these first feathers, in some birds, they will actually curve down and be ridged kind of like that. So they'll go straight and then they'll curve down a little. For like the first two or three feathers, they'll kind of curve like that. And then they'll be sort of the nice straight and knife shape that we all recognize. That's just a fun little detail that you can add in there is this curve. So yeah, go into your secondaries. Okay. And now for the leg. Their hip bones and legs are follow the same sort of structure that ours do. So instead of going down, up, down, like the feather would, they go up, down, up if he's going to perch on something. So they have an opposite joint pattern is what you could call that. And again, there's only three main lines that you have to worry about. For legs in a warbler, usually in birds, their thigh bone is the shortest bone in their body. So like here's the top of the thigh bone. Like here would be like a crane leg. There's his thigh, there's his calf, and then here's his foot. Their legs are super, super, super long. And then in like a warbler, it would be a little bit more equal, the lengths of all of his bones. A quick note about bird feet. Most birds have three toes in the front, one in the back. The middle toe is usually much longer than the others. Kind of helps them perch on stuff. Okay. So after you have lined up all of your bird's joints, we can start drawing his feather mass, all the fluff on the bird. Turn this down a bit so you can see. So start from here. See, he's bulking up for winter. Although, of course, the main shape of his body. An interesting fact about the tail of the bird. Let me kind of go into detail about that as well. So here's your bird. Um, Most people, when they draw their birds, they will end up um, connecting the pivot of the tail in the wrong place. So then they'll end up having the bird's tail pivot from like way out here. And really, if we're looking at the structure of his body, here's his backbone, here's his chest bone, here's all his pelvis and stuff. Really, the tailbone starts right here at the end of his pelvis. So instead of pivoting way out here, the tail should pivot from deeper inside of the body. And you'll see this pivoting happen a lot on like house wrens and stuff like that. And mockingbirds will kind of pump their tail like that as well, and palm warblers. So now let's give this guy a tail. Some nice long feathers. You'll see this kind of uh cone shape on the side. Like usually when you're looking at a bird from the side view, you'll see both the underside and the side of the tail. And that's because the way that they move their bodies and the way that you're looking at them, it's not a completely perfect 2D view of the bird, so you'll end up seeing the side of his tail, and then you'll probably see the inside of the tail feathers, like so. There we have our little bird. He's got some pretty small wings, so that would probably be like a chickadee. Um, Let me put some more details on this leg just so you guys know how to structure them. So for his feet. So this thigh bone, you really won't see much of the bird's thigh. This will pretty much all be covered in fluff. The only time you'll ever see a bird's thigh is maybe in a crane or particularly in like a jay or a raptor. So that's all fluffy up there. I like to thin out the leg on the bone and then thicken it out again where we know those joints are because there's not much fat or muscle or anything to there. So you want to be able to show where those joints are. You want to emphasize that's that line quality I talked about earlier, where it's thin in the middle and then thicker on the outside. That kind of makes your picture more interesting and draws the viewer's eye to those certain parts of the bird. For the feet, a little more detailed would be they also have three main bones. So here's his claw at the front. And then one bone, two bone, claw. Uh, for a simplified version of a bird foot, I would do a slight curve on the top of his toe, kind of like how our fingers are shaped. And then to help them grip, they have sort of that shape going on. Again, very similar to how our fingers look. In that bird drawing book that I showed you guys, the one by John Muir Laws, he goes into great detail about all of the scales on the birds. So I didn't pay attention much to this, but different birds will have different scale patterns. So like some birds will have completely smooth lower legs, and then some will have like scales all on the top. It's pretty cool. But again, if you're a beginner, you don't have to worry about that stuff. Just worry about the main shapes of the joints that they are his leg. Okay, so there is our little bird that we've constructed. Now we're gonna do the same process with some other birds, uh, just to show you how different their bodies can look, but that the building blocks will always be the same, no matter what their bodies look like. So here is a scrub jay. Again, we're gonna start out. I like to start in purple just to show the different parts. We're gonna start out with the main building blocks of his body. So his head and his body. So his body starts around here. Draw a rough kind of an egg shape. Egg shape is a safe way to go for bird bodies. And his head. You're not gonna draw the shape of the skull just yet. This is just like if a bird is in a specific pose. Just doing these first circles and then like putting, I call it a posture line down the center can help you perfect the pose of the bird and his posture. Like in art, this is called a gesture drawing, a very quick sketch just to get the energy of whatever you're observing. And then after that, you can go more specific into our joints. So I like to include the bones and joint stage in the same. So like I would draw his neck. And then I might sketch maybe what his skull is doing inside that little fluffy head of his. Something vaguely like that. And yeah, bird eye sockets are pretty large because we only see a small portion of their eye. So there's this eyeball that we see, but like the whole thing would probably be much larger. All right, now after that, we will construct his chest bones. So there's that main. Um, Once you start getting better at depicting 3D forms on a 2D surface, so like just you know how to draw a cube where you set up all those shapes and then at the end it's oh wow, 3D picture. Uh with birds are the same way. You can kind of start to visualize to yourself what would his backbone look like, even though you can't see it, would probably go like that. So even more simplified, this shape would just be a simple circle with some lines in it. That's all we're doing. Is here's his front, here's his back. This would be sort of the planes of his body. What would separate his body in half is this circle in the middle, and then the circle showing the sides. Um, Another weird representation of that, you could think, oh, if I fit two coins directly in one another and put it inside the body of a bird, like how would those that's a good way to represent his bones in there. So here's his backbone. So now we're gonna connect his wings and his legs. So first off, we'll do the wings. We can only see one. So we'll do down, up to his shoulder, which is right here, and then down. And then for his legs, so his body, let's say his core is all the way up here, and his legs look super long. That's because his legs are super long, but we can only see half of them because of all these feathers that are in the way. So where are we going to start the top of his leg? We're going to start them sort of right here. So here's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then his feet. That's one of my favorite drawing exercises to do is I'll just sketch a bird, or I'll again just pull up a picture of a bird and then draw what I think its skeleton would look like inside of the bird, or draw what when baby birds don't have any feathers and they look like these weird naked little creatures, kind of draw that inside of the bird. This way we can get a feel for how his body looks without all the feathers. Because if you have a sense of what their body looks like and how all their joints interact and move, um, then you know where to put the feathers on top of that. And then once you know where all that goes, you will have a coherent image that has life and has form and makes sense. Because yeah, you can draw some circles and put a beak on there, some feathers on his head, draw the wings, and that's technically correct. That looks like a pretty cute bird, but knowing specifically where all the joints line up and what the skeleton looks like will be much more helpful to you. But that's why I kind of broke it down in this process so that you had 3 steps. You had the purple circle to define where his posture was, get a very brief feel for what kind of life the bird has. Is he standing still? What kind of pose is he in? How is he leaning to the right or to the left? Um, and then you go in and you see where your joints are, and you start to visualize the skeleton underneath the bird. And then after that, finally, you go into your wings and your tail feathers. I always forget to do the tail feathers. I usually end up doing this last. Um, and then obviously after you've done all that stuff, if I'm doing it on a piece of paper, I very, very lightly erase that. Um, and the more you draw, the lighter you can erase, the more you can erase that. So like starting out here, we would have it this dark. Like when I was first learning art, like I was in high school and stuff, when I would erase it, it would be like that dark. But now I can get to the point where I almost completely erase it because my muscle memory has built up so much that my hand kind of knows what it's doing already. So I can completely erase that and then draw the bird over it. And when you're creating paintings and stuff, that skill becomes much more handy because a lot of the times, beginners, and this is totally valid, you will kind of push your pencil. Your first inclination is to push the pencil very hard into the surface of the paper. And if you were to color that in with colored pencils, you can erase your uh, pencil drawing underneath that, and you won't be able to see your pencil lines anymore. Um, but because you've pushed so hard into the paper, it creates these little valleys in the paper, which will end up being white when you color over with your colored pencil. So just be kind of mindful again of how you're holding your pencil. Hold it as light as possible. And I'm kind of a hypocrite for that because I get cramped really easily in my hands. But try your hardest. So if we were gonna add feathers onto this scrub jay, I've completely gone away with the image of the bird. So let's see if we can successfully recreate the bird on top of our preliminary anatomy sketch, let's call that. Start with our neck. The top of his head. Again, his feathers are going to stick out further than where the bones are. That's how birds insulate themselves. They have all that nice fluff. That would be his beak. And now the eye socket's very large, but remember we want to draw the eye much smaller than the socket because we can only see a very small part of the eyeball when we're actually looking at the bird. He's starting to look crowish. You can definitely tell that he's a corvid. We're on the right track. And so the way that he was angled, we remember that we can only see like one part of his wing. So I'll simplify that by just doing this sort of teardrop shape. Again, when you're beginning, it's always best to be mindful of the details, but you don't necessarily have to include them from the get-go, just to make it easier on yourself. So here would be his coverts. And then the way that he's twisted his body around, the primary feathers would have some kind of that curve in them. Some fluff here to maybe indicate a shoulder. Remember, lots of fluff around what would be the bird's thigh, because we don't really see that. We only see the bottom 2 leg bones. And then carve in your legs. Remember, the middle toe is the longest of three, usually. I haven't studied their feet in too much detail, but that's a good rule to follow, is that the middle toe is usually the longest. Here's our second leg. And the reason the second leg is going to look a lot longer than the first one is because of foreshortening. And again, the way that he's leaning, that posture line that we established when we first drew him. He's got, so here would be like the stick that he's perching on. He's got one leg up here, one leg more stretched out. And then last but not least, let's give him a tail. Which you can just do a couple of like rectangular looking shapes for that. So here's our line work, is what we would call it in the art world. Let's see how well it compares to the image of the bird. That was our reference when we erased that. Not too bad. Not off by a ton. So I could have, when I first started at this sketch, I probably could have uh, paid more attention to how his neck is. So I drew his neck way out here when it was back a little more. Okay. For the next bird, we're going to be looking at this blue jay, another corvid. Um, and this is drawing the bird from the back. Same principles, different angle. So your first lines is always going to be that wrong layer. Okay, that kind of posture line, how the angle of the bird is, the establishing circles. Where's his skull? Where's his body? What's going on in here? Then his joints and his bones. So here would be his backbone. His chest bone would be up here, but on the other side of him, obviously, that we can't see. Here is his eye. Here is his little skull. Okay. Now his legs and wings. Just where the wings would start. We don't really have to worry about this one too much, other than remembering that they kind of meet in almost a heart shape, but not quite. So this will go down, up to here, and then down again, all the way to the wingtip. And then once we do the lines of the bird, we'll keep the picture of the bird up just so that we can see the feather groups. They're illustrated very well in these blue jays because they're barring that they have. Okay, so this guy's legs, if you don't know where to start the leg from the inside of the body, you can always start from where is he perched. So draw the bottom. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, something like that. Okay. All that out of the way. Let's take a closer look at these wings. There's coverts. Here's one wing. And on most birds, they will overlap their wings. Like here's his right wing. His feathers are kind of coming over like that. They're so pretty. Just the top of the left wing. I believe these would be the median coverts. Don't quote me on that though. I haven't remembered all the names for them yet. These are less downy and fluffy than the the lesser coverts. Here's his Alula all the way down here. Those are those little, if you're looking at the wings of a bird, those would kind of be the equivalent of our thumb, the way they would stick out. On most birds, they're hidden in the corner like this, just kind of sitting there. And here are his big, long, beautiful flight feathers. Here's the flight feathers of the other wing. No feathers, easy peasy, just some rounded rectangles. Okay, now that we have the wings in place, let's take away the image of the bird. Actually, no. We'll just put the stick in for reference so we know where to put his feet. Let's take away the image of the bird, keep our sketch layer up so that we can do what we did with the scrub jay and see if we can build the bird around the sketch that we had and see how accurate we can get it. After this blue jay, I'll probably just draw a bird from imagination, one that you can all kind of slow down a little bit more and show you guys what to do when you don't have uh, the luxury of having your sketch layers underneath you and being able to turn them up or down like you would on the computer. Fluffy little legs. Yeah, like on this guy, I remember from the photo. Um, just working off memory, I remember that he had some pants going on, and that's just due to the length of his bones and how much we could actually see. I'm not going to pay too much attention to the feet this time. Okay, here's our finished bird. Let's see how it matches up with the reference image. Pretty spot on. Could have added even more fluff though. Okay, let's do something a little different. Go to a new canvas. For our last drawing, we'll do a bird from memory. So here's how this all connects. Here's how you go from drawing birds in your room, just having fun with it. Here's how this will actually help you in the real world. All right. Say you saw a warbler, and you've already been drawing birds for a while, so you know how they're structured and stuff. So let's draw what this warbler's head may have looked like. Here's his body. I'll try to go a little slower so that you guys can follow along. We know that the warbler was kind of perched looking at us like this, kind of from the side. Okay, now we do his joints and his bones. So let's the reason I did this cross in the middle is just to show where the middle of his face would be. So he would be looking at us from maybe sort of a three-quarters view. So here's his creepy looking kind of skull. Hey, it's Halloween. Maybe he had a decently long beak. Draw his neck, which um most animals will have that nice S curve in their necks. That's something I didn't touch on, but in smaller birds you can't see their necks at all. But in birds like these cranes, like if I were to draw this bird, there's his head. They have a very pronounced curve in their necks. They're very elegant. Okay, back to this guy. Here's the front of his chest bone. Let's say when we were looking at this bird in the field, he had his wings sort of spread out. He was posing very nicely for us. And let's just say we remembered enough to draw him, but we didn't have enough time to get a reference photo. So there's the one wing. Maybe he's stretching his wing out. Maybe he just woke up from a nap. Let's do our feather groups. Here's our secondaries. And here's our primaries. Sometimes I like to draw those curves underneath just to map out the path that the feathers would take on the wing before I actually draw in all these little feathers. Draw the rest of our flight feathers in, our primaries. All right. Now for his legs. They go up, down, up, down, up, opposite of the wing, which went down, up, down. Okay. Let's do his feathers nice and fanned out like that. Okay, we've got our main structures kind of mapped out. Now we can go and put our lines onto this bird. I'll do this really quick so that we can kind of focus on maybe the colors of the bird, what we saw. Because here's what we might be doing in the field. One really great example of this, I was out birding at the wetlands park. It was last winter, and I saw these ducks, and at that point, I hadn't, paid much attention to waterfowl because that's just not the birds that I was focused on. I always figured, they're kind of difficult to identify. I'm not gonna, you know, pay much mind to them. And it kind of bit me in the butt because I saw these beautiful birds out in the wetlands park, and I had no clue what they were. So me being the nerd that I am, I went into one of my three field guides that I was carrying with me at the time. And it took me a couple minutes, but because I drew a sketch of the bird, um, I remember that it was a duck. I remembered maybe where the colors were. I actually sketched in the field while I was looking at him. He was a long ways off, but I remembered, oh, he had this shaped wing, and he had, these kind of colors going on, and it ended up being a what was it, a green winged teal or a blue winged teal? I think it was probably the green. And if I had not drawn that bird in the field actively, I would not have been able to identify him because my memory is kind of bad. I would have forgotten, where the bar is on his wing, what color specifically he was. Like I think he had sort of a dark head, but yeah. Um, even if you're not drawing birds like this, don't stress about it. It's not the end of the world. I mean, you can draw a very simple picture of a duck like that, just sitting in the water. And let's say this is just an imaginary bird, like, oh, it's a yellow-tailed rudder or something like that, but you don't know what type of bird it is. You can put your field marks in, like you can point to there and be like, oh, he had a yellow rump or something, and make all your nice notes. And then take it back to your field guides in the car because you don't want to lug those around with you unless you're crazy. Um, Take those back to your car and be like, oh yeah, that's exactly the bird that I saw. That's a yellow rumped rudder or whatever it is. Um, but yeah, that's it, you'll drawing helps you connect your brain directly to your hands, and that builds up your observation skills because you're actively looking at these things. You're actively trying to figure out and trying to remember what you saw. You're engaging your brain in a way that it's not really used to being used, but it's very healthy for your brain. Finishing off our flight feathers here. Yeah, there's our imaginary little warbler. He's kind of chickadee-ish. Just drawn from memory using those principles that I taught you guys. Putting in our sketch and then our lines on top. Yeah, that's why I said you guys are at more of an advantage than other people would be learning art because you already know what birds look like. You know their anatomy pretty well by now. Now all you have to do is just get a bunch of bird photos, sit down, and draw them. You don't have to do that guesswork. You can remember, oh, I know a bird wing looks like this. So all the hard work would only be doing just making that muscle memory happen. And that will happen pretty quick. Because now you know your wing structure, you know what a blue jay looks like, you know what an owl looks like. You're already at an advantage. It's going to be pretty difficult to get over the hump of, oh, why do my drawings look so bad? Like, not every drawing is going to look great. Um, and if you go into every drawing thinking that it's going to look amazing, you will have a very bad time making art. So I would just prioritize making more art in the field. That's a good way to make it fun for yourself. Because again, if your drawing looks bad, it's not the end of the world. At least you had fun making it. You had fun getting outside. The weather's nice, take advantage of the weather. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps my section up. Um, if anybody has questions, go ahead and ask them.
That was awesome. I am really impressed with your skills in drawing and how fast you can draw and accurately. And I learned a lot.
Thank you.
I have painted and drawn birds in the past, and I have never thought about drawing their bones first. And that makes so much more sense to be able to kind of see the structure and then how the body, like the feathers and the fluff, hangs onto the bones in the particular ways. And then even just drawing the feet, like I can never figure out the feet. But you explaining that of the three bones and then how the toes are and underneath the bones and all of that. I think you've just improved my bird drawing.
Good. That was what I aimed to do. Even just look at this picture of the Color and Light book. This is a really good illustration of uh bird anatomy. Like here's this die. You can see how long each of those bones are. If you want to draw birds, you could easily draw dinosaurs and get away with it and get the same type of skill level out of it. Like here, let me pull up pictures of bird skeletons. Yeah, it does make sense when people are like, "Oh, they're just little dinosaurs," because yeah, they really are. They're very funny to look at. I'm pulling up a picture of like a pigeon skeleton right now. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, here's a pigeon skeleton. So yeah, here's those bone masses that I was talking about in the chest. I didn't, I'm not a bone scientist. I don't know the names of the bones, but I know sure as heck what the shapes are, and that's the only thing that you really need to know at the end of the day. You just need to know what the shapes are and where they are. It doesn't really matter what name you give them. You could give it a completely imaginary name in your head as long as it helps you draw the bird better. So yeah. Oh, they had this super weird chest bone. What's this called? Number 23. That's called the keeled sternum. Yeah, it does look like the keel of a ship. That makes sense. Um, Here's his hips. That's how similar they are to humans, kind of. Instead of uh the up down up shape, the pattern you could go forwards, backwards, forwards. That would probably be a lot easier. And then the wing follows again the opposite pattern. Backwards, forwards, backwards. Here's his tailbone. Here's his pelvis and stuff. Like how long this dude's neck is. I really love seeing pictures of bitterns and other birds that like stretch their necks out super long. And like where do they hide it? It's because it has that funny little S shape to it. Like look at this. You guys have probably seen bitterns before, but it's the best way to illustrate that. Look at this dude. So yeah, any more questions or comments? I saw I think Tammy put something in there. Thank you, Tammy. So yeah, the Law's Guide to Drawing Birds. This guy is an amazing artist. He does a lot of field sketching and nature journaling. I just recommend that you guys do as much nature journaling as possible. It doesn't have to be birds. Um, that's another thing that could help your bird ID. We were talking about this on the last birding walk that we did, noticing the habitat of the birds. So like you could draw your bird and then you could put a bunch of flowers around the bird that you see. Like maybe you saw a brown-headed nuthatch. You could draw like a bunch of pine trees that you saw around the nuthatch. This way, you're making those connections in your brain. You're making the physical connection of, let me draw this thing. This way, it connects your brain to your arm. But you're also making the connection of, oh, this is where the nuthatch lives. And then you can draw other birds that live in that same habitat. You can have this beautiful spread of birds and plants on the same thing, and you've learned so much from it. Thank you, Liz. I see that chat. Um, yeah, this first book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, is really, really good for beginner artists. It has a lot of drills and exercises to get you started on the principles of art. I would recommend buying that and the Drawing Birds book first. They both have those at Barnes and Noble. Color and Light is also there. That might take you a bit to. It's a pretty dense book, so I would just get those first two for now.
Alex, which app are you using to draw?
Ooh, so that's called Paint Tool Sai. It's this Japanese drawing program. Um, it's like $50 for a license, and then you just download it to your computer. I like it because they email you the serial number for the license. Like, say you get your computer ruined, you could move the license around to a new computer. You just have to have the identification number of the computer. If you guys want to download that, uh, just put your email in the chat, and I can probably send you an email about it. It's not that difficult. I would just need to explain it to you. I think that's $50. Um, oh, a really good free drawing program that's pretty dang similar is called Fire Alpaca. Let me show this to you guys. Yeah, this is Fire Alpaca. It looks pretty much identical to Paint Tool Sai. The interface is a lot more user-friendly. It's a little bit less complicated. This one is free. I believe they also have app version 2 for the iPad and stuff like that. So yeah, download Fire Alpaca.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, I would love to do another one of these more in-depth drawing programs in the future, maybe just more specific birds. Maybe we'll do like an in-person meeting and we'll draw some birds together. I think that'd be cool.
That would
So
be
yeah,
fun.
thank you guys for joining me. It was a great, great pleasure being able to share my skills with you. Even though I did not finish through art school, I'm really glad that I still get to use these skills every day. It's a good blessing that I have.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you,
Yeah, no
Alex.
problem. Y'all have a good night.
Alex. Thank you so much, dear. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
No problem.
Thanks, Alex.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.